So, Jenny, could he actually win?
No freaking way!
He is not, Donald Trump is not going to be president of the United States. Take it to the bank. Okay. I guarantee it.
All right.
And which Republican candidate has the best chance of winning the general election?
Of the declared ones, right now, Donald Trump.
Hillary Clinton has called Donald Trump to concede the...
People like Vivek, but he's not, right? I mean, come on. It's not going to happen. Right. He's not going to overtake Donald Trump.
Trump is perfectly happy to see Ramaswamy rise. He knows that Ramaswamy is not only not a threat to him, he refuses to cross him.
Whatever you're getting, 7%, no one's taking that serious.
I've been waiting for you, Obi-Wan. We meet again at last. The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master. Your powers are weak, old man.
What's the difference between a wet raccoon and Donald J. Trump's hair? A wet raccoon doesn't have $7 billion fucking dollars in the bank.
I'm an entrepreneur. My parents came to this country with no money 40 years ago. I have gone on to found multi-billion-dollar companies.
So in this video, I'm going to go over some of the prominent arguments that are against Vivek beating Trump. And I'll sort of give you my thoughts on each of these arguments, and I'll play clips and show you examples of how these arguments are in some part maybe true and some part maybe not true, and sort of what the dynamic would be between Trump and Vivek if they started contending against each other. So the prominent arguments I'm going to go over, starting with Vivek isn't actually trying to beat Trump. He just wants to be Trump's VP. Now, that's an argument a lot of people are making, especially because of how nice Vivek has been to Trump. So that might be true. It's certainly possibly true that he's really just looking for a prominent role in Trump's administration. But even if that is true, the more support Vivek gets in his individual campaign right now, the more support he'll have, and the more likely it is that he'll have a prominent position within Trump's administration. So even if that is true, he's still incentivized to continue his campaign and continue campaigning like for himself independently while being nice to Trump. And even if that is his initial goal, I'll remind everybody that back in 2008, Obama initially really didn't intend to win that election, that primary against Hillary. He really was trying to get his name out there. And his goal really changed as the campaign progressed, as he was able to see how much support he was able to get. So the same thing could be for Vivek. Maybe his initial goals when coming into this campaign were to become a part of Trump's cabinet or his VP. But as the campaign progresses, if he's able to get the type of support that could actually win him the nomination, his goals could change, and he could actually decide, you know what? Why work for the man when I could be the man? Another option is he might not actually want to beat Trump or be in his administration, or his goals might not even be to be president or be in the public sector. He might just want to actually just create a blueprint for Trump to fight the administrative state, and he might want to be able to highlight that, because anyone could come up with an agenda and tell him as an advisor, oh, this is what I would do. But by getting out there, being on the campaign trail and pushing an agenda and making it clear what he would do to fight the administrative state, and setting agenda items in order to fight those, he can make that agenda more prominent by running. And so it's possible that he's laying out sort of a blueprint for Trump or any of the other Republicans to sort of follow. And it's possible that that's sort of what's behind it. Now, if he has no interest, like he said, in becoming VP or being a part of Trump's administration, there are several reasons that would support that. First of all, Trump has a tendency to sort of turn on some of the people who work for him. You could just look at the example of that. Not very many people who worked for Trump and his administration are supporting him now or have endorsed him. Some are definitely, but he does have a tendency where those relationships don't always last. And so if Vivek's looking at this opportunity to work with Trump, he could be thinking of it as it's better for him to not work directly under Trump and work as more in the private sector as sort of an informal advisor of sorts. Might be where his head is at. And there's also the question of if Trump doesn't win, and if Vivek became a part of his administration, if he was his VP or set to be a part of his cabinet and Trump doesn't win, or even if he is a part of Trump's cabinet after he does win, and then after Trump there's a Democrat who's elected, that Democrat's administration could very likely come after Vivek as being part of Trump's administration, or even local Democratic prosecutors could come after Vivek because they've shown that they're willing to use the Justice Department and local prosecutors to come after anyone who is close to Trump. So that alone might significantly dissuade Vivek from wanting to be a part of Trump's administration. And by the way, that's the goal of all of these Democratic prosecutors and the Justice Department. They know that even if they can't get a conviction, they can force you to spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees. So even if they can't convict you, they can still bankrupt you and make it very difficult for you to get employment. So that's the whole goal of that anyway, and that could be a serious consideration for Vivek, and if he wants to work for Trump.
I'm running against him in this race, okay?
I think you're running to be his vice president.
Well, I'm glad you smoked that view out. I've already said, and I'll say it again, I'm not going to work for any administration.
So you would say no to it?
Yeah, I would say no.
You would say no to the vice presidency if Donald Trump offered it to you?
I don't do well in a number 2 role.
So another common argument for why Vivek can't beat Trump is people are saying that Vivek's support is from people who are supportive of Trump, and so why would they vote for Vivek instead of Trump if they're people who support Trump? So first, I think it's important to remember that in the current polls, Vivek is polling around 10%, and that's in polls that Trump is also in. So this 10% of the electorate, which still is way below what Trump has, these are specifically people who are choosing Vivek over Trump already. So there's already like a distinction of Trump and Vivek people. But then Vivek is also putting himself sort of firmly shoulder to shoulder with people who are appalled at what the DOJ and Democrats are doing to Trump. And then he's saying that he's an even better champion for this group that he considers himself a part of to help their anti-Trump case, right? So this is a group of people who are anti-Trump and willing to do anything to get Trump, and that's one of the reasons I think a lot of conservatives are diehard in support of Trump, is they want to basically give the middle finger to these people who are anti-Trump. And Vivek is sort of putting himself in the position where I'm a part of that group too. I hate what they're doing to Trump. I'm the best champion for the anti-Trump cause. And then I think it's really important also to remember when Vivek started the very first Republican debate, he used an opening line that was directly from Obama, and he used it, one, because it fits him, another skinny guy with a weird last name, but I think that he mostly used it to solicit the comparison between himself and Obama. I don't think it was really about using that line because it was the best opening line. I think he thought it would be a good opening line, but I think more importantly, it solicits the comparison between Vivek and Obama. And I think that he really wanted to solicit that comparison, not from an ideological standpoint, but first, I think Chris Christie obliged and made the comparison immediately for him. So he was trying to solicit the comparison. The first thing that happened after he used that line, or somewhat soon after he used that line, was Chris Christie immediately pointed out that that was Obama's line. And I think that he wanted that comparison, and he wanted to solicit especially the comparison of Obama in the early years, when most of the country thought of him as having like a very hopeful message. And so I think that the impression of early Obama is exactly what he was soliciting, and I think that he was successful in getting that comparison somewhat. Although I don't think that most people were playing the clips of Obama and Vivek saying that same thing next to each other, which is I think what he was hoping would happen to really like more solidify in not just the Republican but in the general voting audience the connection between this is the new Obama. And I think that specifically CNN and MSNBC and all these liberal places are specifically not trying not to make that comparison.
I think I'm best positioned to advance our America First agenda, take it even further than Trump did, but also unite the country in the process. I think we live in an interesting moment today in the year 2023. I think it's a 1776 moment. If you want incremental reform, there are plenty of other candidates who promise to offer that. I stand on the side of revolution, the American Revolution, reviving those 1776 ideals today. When it comes to shutting down the administrative state, restoring 3 branches of government rather than 4, declaring independence from our enemy, Communist China, reviving national pride in the next generation, growing the economy. I think I'm the candidate best positioned to achieve these things.
So another argument against Vivek beating Trump is that Vivek said that Trump is the best president of the 21st century. So the argument goes, why would people vote for Vivek if Trump's the best president of the 21st century, and Vivek's saying that? Well, I think that one issue that sort of definitely comes up with the comparison between Trump and Vivek is that Trump has already been president, and Vivek doesn't have much foreign policy experience to speak of, which is why I think that he's spending a lot of time talking about specifically what he would do in Ukraine, not just the general ideas that he would put into practice when it comes to foreign policy, but like specifically what deals he would try and hammer out. And this goes with Ukraine, and it's same thing with Israel, and same thing with Taiwan, and the same thing basically with any area of foreign policy that he gets asked about. He tries to give very specific details as to what his agenda items would be in those areas. And I think that he's trying to shore up how people think of his abilities on foreign policy without having the experience. I think that one of the biggest differences that he tries to make between himself and Trump is that Trump has to rely on people for legal expertise. So if Trump wants to pass a law or do something using executive power or whatever, he has to rely on legal experts who work for him, breaking down and telling him exactly what he can't do, and how stuff should be written, shouldn't be written. He doesn't do any of that firsthand. It's all secondhand. And Vivek has a law degree. He has studied the law. He has a deep understanding of the law. And I think that he really wants to make it clear that he is not going to rely on any advisors to tell him what he can and can't do. And even if, to the extent that he has legal advisors, he'll make them explain points in detail, and he'll push back on those same advisors and not rely on them. And I think that's a big distinction he's constantly making. I think that he also, as good as a president as Trump was, I think that he also continues to talk about how divided the country was even under Trump. And I think that Vivek tries to make the point that he can expand, he is part of the Trump tent, and he can expand all of the people who support Trump for the same reasons that they support Trump, and he can expand that tent to people who are currently not willing to come into that tent just because Trump is the person who's leading the group. And I think Vivek is sort of trying to go to specifically to younger people who may or may not be predisposed to liking Trump. I think that the like younger generation seems to be a little bit more conservative than like millennials. And so they might be a little bit more predisposed to liking Trump, but I think even Vivek has an easier time reaching the younger demographics. That's why you see him like rapping on stage, or showing videos off of him like working out or playing tennis or doing burpees with his wife. So I think it's all about like being able to show that he can expand the base, and like open up the tent to people who otherwise wouldn't be willing to look twice at Trump. I think also one of the biggest points that differentiates Trump and Vivek as far as when it comes to like being able to win in the election is Vivek's understanding of the legal charges against Trump and his ability to break them down. Trump is also affected by the fact that if Trump says something about his legal charges, that can also be used in court against him. So Vivek has a lot easier time talking about them because there aren't charges against him. So his words aren't going to be used against him, but Trump's words could be used against Trump. And so Vivek is much better at undermining the attacks against Trump in great detail. He like breaks down each charge, and he shows that in detail the charges against Trump are not based on merit, and he also like brings it back to the political motive that they have.
President Trump, I believe, was the best president of the 21st century. It's a fact. I think there's only two candidates who matter in this Republican primary. That's President Trump and myself. I went from 0.0% now to polling third nationally, second in one national poll that came out last week. So I think very soon this is going to be a two-horse race between Trump and myself. I think the question is this: who's going to actually take our America First agenda even further? I think he was a good president. I agree with many, if not most, of his policies. But the reality is about 30% of this country suffers from psychiatric illness when he's in the White House. People start to disagree with policies they otherwise would have agreed with just because he's the one advancing them. I'm achieving more than Trump did with our own shared agenda to put this country first, but at the same time, uniting the country in the process.
If you believe Donald Trump is the greatest president of the 21st century, he's running. Why are you running against him? Why do you think his second term won't be as good as his first?
Well, look, I did say he's the best president of the 21st century. From George Bush to Barack Obama to Joe Biden to Donald Trump, I think it's not even close. Who was the best of those presidents? In my book, I judge by results. That being said, I believe I can take the America First agenda even further than Donald Trump did. I think I will be more effective in uniting this country in the process. Look at the way we're running this campaign. I'm not leaving any state behind, any city behind, no American left behind. From the south side of Chicago to Kensington to places where traditional Republicans don't go. I think I am best positioned to deliver a landslide election, a multi-ethnic working class majority. And I do think that a landslide is what we need in this country, not another 50.1 election. And I'm the only candidate in this race who can actually deliver that.
Look, a Politico neophyte outsider became president and couldn't get a lot of the things done that he wanted to get done.
So I think there's three things I would say. The first is we have that experience to learn from. I want to build on the foundation that Trump laid. Frankly, I will invite him as an advisor and a mentor. I don't want to relearn the same lessons. I want to pick up where he left off in taking on the administrative state. The second thing, Chuck, is I do think it needs to be an outsider to take on that administrative state. But I also think it needs to be an outsider who has a deep first personal understanding of the laws and constitution of this country. I think Trump was in many cases duped by his managerial advisors, for example, who said that you can't fire employees in the federal government due to civil service protections. Read the law. Turns out those civil service protections only apply to individual firings, not to mass layoffs. Mass layoffs are absolutely what I will bring to the D.C. bureaucracy. And I think the fact that I am from a different generation, Chuck, will be an asset. In fact, the U.S. president can do this. I pushed Trump's people on why they didn't end affirmative action. Lyndon Johnson started it by executive order. I've said I would end it on by executive order. You know, Trump's people said that was a political hill they didn't want to die on. And I think that's one of the things that's different about me. I'm taking the America First agenda further than Donald Trump or anybody ever did, because I'm doing it based on first principles and moral conviction, not just vengeance and grievance.
Are you coming to his defense tomorrow, or are you saying that he did nothing wrong? What's your position on this?
My position on this is that this is an awful judgment by President Biden and the ruling party to prosecute a former president of the United States, especially on charges that appear to be actually as questionable as what's reflected in that indictment. The number of omissions in that indictment, Leland, are striking. I've laid this out elsewhere. The failure to mention the Presidential Records Act or judicial precedent in 2012, interpreting that act, giving the president sole authority to determine what records do and don't count. The fact that the classification standards were themselves set forth by executive orders, which don't bind future presidents. I could go on the legalities, but the fact that those were omitted in that indictment, to me, reeks of politicization. And I am worried that this sets a dangerous precedent in our country of the party in power weaponizing the federal police against its political opponents. So to me, this has less to do with Trump and more to do with that principle, and that's what I'm standing for. This is not about politics to me. This is about first principles. We do not want to become a country where the party in power is able to use banana republic-like tactics to eliminate its political opponents. Yet I'm sad to say that's exactly where we are. The allegations in this indictment fall flat. It is wrong and incorrect and inaccurate to place blame for what happened on January 6th at the feet of Donald Trump. I said this at the time. I've said it ever since then. I continue to say it today. I would not have made the same judgments that Donald Trump did in how he handled that day. But that's different from saying that he committed a crime. He did not. He specifically told the protesters that day to behave peacefully. The First Amendment in this country gives political protesters the ability to express themselves and their opinions freely. Donald Trump was not responsible for what happened on January 6th. You want to know what was responsible? I said this in the days after January 6, 2021, just as I say it today. Systematic, pervasive censorship in this country.
So next I want to talk about how everybody attacked Trump in the 2016 primary and nothing worked. And so what would the dynamics be if Vivek started going against Trump, and how would that be different, and how could it be successful? In 2016, everybody tried lots of different things to go against Trump, and a lot of commentators said that the normal rules of political gravity just didn't work on Trump. And I don't think that that's true. I think that there's a very good analogy to Mercury's orbit. Before Einstein, people thought that they didn't understand why Newtonian physics couldn't predict Mercury's orbit, and then when Einstein came along, then they understood why it was poorly predicted before, and now it's a new understanding of gravity. So I think it's the same thing here. Trump isn't an exception to the rules of political gravity. He just shows us there are different rules than we understood them to be. And so, speaking of how people went against Trump in the 2016 primary, you had Rubio and Cruz are some of the best examples. And I think at first they really just tried to ignore Trump, and they thought that he had like a spike in the polls at first, but that people were going to get tired of it and it was going to go away. And so they just tried to ignore him and sort of let that process take hold. But when it was clear that that wasn't going to happen, then they tried to attack him on typical political issues and in ways that they would typically attack other politicians. And when that also didn't really work, and so then they started trying to play his game. And you might remember in the 2016 primaries, Rubio even started making fun of Trump for the size of his hands. And the second that Rubio started to play Trump's game, it was over for him, because that's Trump's game. Trump's way better at it than he is, and the like senatorial sort of impression, the high-minded impression that Rubio had previously given people, was destroyed the second he started playing games with Trump like that. I think Vivek is going to take a very different type of strategy. I think that he's already been planting all kinds of seeds to support this strategy, but I would call it the sidle, support, and separate method. And so it has sort of like three different parts to it. The first one would be like the sidle, which would be to align himself with Trump on issues and with the indignation of how Trump is being treated. So I think that specifically he talks about the border wall, and he talks about foreign policy in a way that's definitely similar to Trump, and all kinds of issues in a way that's similar to Trump. And definitely on the indignation of how he's being treated, he really is just completely shoulder to shoulder. And then the next step I would call support, and saying that when he's president, he'll pardon Trump immediately. So this is not a shoulder to shoulder, this is a I support Trump role, saying that he'll disband the corrupt FBI and bring order to corrupt agencies that go after Trump and conservatives. So this is not just supporting Trump, but also I'll support Trump and all of Trump's followers, all of the conservatives that these agencies are going after. I'm going to support you by going after them, disbanding them, getting rid of them. And then I think that the last step is separate. And at this, I think this is where he's laid the groundwork for saying that he's better at understanding the law, so he's actually going to be better at executing on their shared vision and shared goals. And I think that saying that he can bring more people into the party, he talks about, especially when it comes to young people, but he also talks about minorities as well, and going to like Chicago and places that a lot of people wouldn't go. If you remember correctly, Trump tried to have a big event in Chicago, and there was basically a huge riot where they were destroying cars, and Trump ended up not even be able to have that campaign event because of the chaos. And I think that in order to separate himself from Trump, he's talking about how he's going into those places that Trump wasn't even able to go into. And so I think that those are like the main tactics that he's going to use to separate himself from Trump: the sidle, support, and separate method.
You know why I love him? I love people that like me.
Get back on your
a lot
meds
of
now.
fun up here tonight, I have to tell you. Thank you for the book.
Donald, relax.
Go ahead. I'm relaxed. You're the basket case. Go ahead. Go ahead. Don't get nervous. Go ahead.
My name is nothing about you that makes anyone nervous.
You're losing so badly watching this. You don't know what's happening.
Person on the stage that's ever been fined for hiring people to work on your projects illegally. You hired some workers from Poland.
I'm the only one on the stage that's hired people. You haven't hired anybody.
Well, in fact, some of the people.
And by the way,
I've
hired tens of thousands of people over my job. You've hired
1,000 people.
You've
from
had
another
nothing
company,
but problems
from another
with your
country.
credit cards, etc.
Let me
so
say.
Don't tell me about
let me finish the statement. This is important.
You haven't hired one. The biggest problem he's
plan.
got is he
What's
doesn't
his plan?
know. I watched him melt down 2 weeks ago with Chris Christie. And I'll tell you, it was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. He's not going down.
He thinks the Palestinian is a real estate deal.
And these people may even be tougher than Chris Christie. Okay, I got along with everybody. You get along with nobody. You don't have one Republican. You don't have one Republican senator, and you work with them every day of your life, although you skipped a lot of time. These are minor details. But you don't have one Republican senator backing you, not one. You don't have the endorsement of one Republican senator, and you work with these people.
Senator Cruz.
You should be ashamed of yourself. Well, you don't know anything about business. You lose on
make
everything
them in
you do.
America.
You don't know anything about it because you're a lousy.
Well, I don't know
businessman.
anything.
To say
Senator
he lied this time. He lied. 100%. 100%. The insurance companies are going to say that. They want to keep it. They want to say. They say whatever they have to say to keep it the way it is. I know the insurance companies. They're friends of mine. The top guys, they're friends of mine. I shouldn't tell you guys. You'll say it's terrible. I have a conflict of interest. They're friends of mine. There's some right in the audience. One of them was just waving to me. He was laughing and smiling. He's not laughing so much anymore. Hi.
Donald, true or false, you said the government should pay for everyone's health care?
That's false.
You've never said that.
No, I never. I said it worked in a couple of countries,
but
you've
never stood on this debate stage and says it works great in Canada and Scotland. We should do it here. Did you say if you want people to die on the streets, if you don't support socialized health care, you have no heart?
Did
you say you're a liberal
on the streets if I'm president?
Have you
First of all, he's talking about the polls. I'm beating him awfully badly in the polls.
But you're not beating Hillary.
So
you're not beating Hillary.
Well, then if I can't, if I can't beat her, you're really going to get killed, aren't you? Nobody on this stage that has done more for Israel than I have. Nobody. You might say, you might talk, your politicians all talk, no action. I've been watching it all my life. You are all talk and no action. What I've seen up here, I mean, first of all, this guy's a joke artist and this guy's a liar.
So the last argument that I want to go over, that Vivek could not beat Trump, is that Vivek's Indian American and Hindu, and there's just not enough support in the GOP for this background to supplant Trump. So first, I think it's really important to understand that Vivek is great at never using his race to answer any question. If you look at Hillary during the 2016 campaign, she, especially when she didn't have a good answer, but even almost no matter what, she would bring up that she's a woman in almost every question. Every answer she gave. Why would you be best at the economy? Because I'm a woman. Why would you be best at foreign policy? Because I'm a woman. So that's not something that Obama did. If you look at he let the subtext of his, the positives from his race speak without actually saying them. And I think it's really important to understand that Vivek is also extremely good at that. He never explicitly says it, but he lets he lets it be known in subtext, that the value of it without ever bringing it up. He also relates very well to religious people and makes them feel like he's behind them. And I think it's also important to remember, there are a bunch of different sects of Christianity, especially in the United States, and so he kind of almost puts himself in a category of a different believer of Jesus, very closely related to their own beliefs in a way that they can get behind him because he's behind them. And I think that it's also important to really understand that there are a lot of conservatives out there who are actually really excited and want to vote for someone who is a minority, just to be able to undercut the left from constantly polarizing race. There were a lot of conservatives who didn't necessarily vote for Obama, but were at least excited when he became president to use this as an opportunity to sort of put race issues behind us. Okay, we don't have to talk about race so much. And I think that they were let down in a big way, because instead of healing racial divisions, Obama used those racial tensions, exacerbated them for his own political gain. And I think that a lot of conservatives, seeing somebody who's a minority come and not use his status as a minority to in politics, will actually be really healing. And so I think if he continues to talk about it the way that he does, it's actually a huge bonus, or it could be a huge bonus in people's minds, especially when it remains subtextual.
So I'm a Hindu. There's many strains like there are of Christianity, Catholicism, etc. There's many strains of Hinduism too. I believe in one true God. I believe that God resides in each of us. I think it is the same statement of spirit when we say in the Christian tradition, and I did go to Catholic schools and I've read the Bible perhaps more closely than most Christians I know. It's the same message as when we say we are equal because we are made in the image of God. It's the same spirit to say that's where our equality comes from. It's not some secular value. We're equal in the eyes of each other because we're equal in the eyes of God. The tradition I was raised in, we say we're equal in the eyes of each other because God resides in each of us. That we each have a duty to one another. You know, to think about that strand of sacrifice and duty. That's foundational to Hinduism. I think it's the common strand between the Old Testament and the New. I mean, God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac for God. He didn't make him follow through with it. The New Testament, God comes back and says, I will sacrifice my son, Jesus Christ, for you, the people. And so that's a long way of saying that I'm not Christian. And just in my spirit of my answer to the last question, I will never pretend to be something I'm not. I'm always going to speak the truth about who I am and what I stand for. But I think it's deeply true that we share the same Judeo-Christian values that this nation was founded on. And this nation was absolutely founded on Judeo-Christian values. That's a fact. It is also a fact that I deeply share those values in common. And to be honest, does our church, does our family, when there isn't a Hindu temple available, will we go for our collection of self to a church if that's the next closest available opportunity for prayer? Yes, we will. And so in our tradition, we say Jesus Christ is a son of God. I understand that's different than saying he's the son of God, but we share the same value set in common. And I'm not running to be pastor-in-chief. I'm running to be commander-in-chief. It's a different role, right? And for that role, I think we share the same value set. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm very impressed with you because I think you act more like a Christian than most Christians.
I agree. Thank you.
What am I supposed to say?
Say, can't talk right now, hanging with my boyfriend. England sucks, you suck, USA #1.